Правительства Франции и Индонезии многократно вручали награды за достижения в гастрономии и за вклад в развитие франко-индонезийских отношений шеф-повару и владельцу ресторана «Мозаик» Крису Салан. Сегодня мы обсудим особенности национального ресторанного менеджмента.
Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon.
We had a great experience at your restaurant a few weeks ago, and I would like to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And thank you again that we have a small talk today with you about your business and life.
Long story.
Would you be kind enough to tell your story about how you became a chef?
How or why?
Why and how?
Okay. Because how is everybody the same, but why can be different. So it's a long story, but I'll make it short. I was the last of three brothers, and I think my brothers are much older than me. And once they left home, I think my parents started traveling a lot more. And so since a very young age, I would say, I actually remember having a Russian dinner when I was 6 years old and having some vodka and caviar. So since the age of about 6 years old, my parents have been traveling with me, eating at amazing restaurants across Europe. They live in France, in Paris. So, in Europe, it's easy to travel and to eat different foods. So I grew up around good food. My mother being French, we went hunting and farming for mushrooms. There's all this French culture. So I was always very, very close to food. And one day I was told I have to choose a career. And I mean, not directly, it's not that easy, but boom, in the end, I chose becoming a chef. I knew I wanted it to be about food, but I didn't know what. You could be a food writer, you could be a nutritionist, I knew it was going to be about food, but it ended up being a chef. How? Like everybody else, knock at the door of a kitchen and say, I want to become a chef, and then they beat you into shape.
You trained in France?
I started in France. Correct. So I started in France, then I went to the US, then from the US, I forget, but I went to Indonesia and then back to the US. But it started all in France at a very young age, to be honest. At the age of 6, when I had that first caviar in blini, is when I started my training as a chef.
Is it true that one has to sacrifice social life until get a certain level in cuisine, in fine dining?
I'm going to say no, but I'll explain why. Because it doesn't stop once you get to a certain level. So you're wrong. To be a chef, you need to make a lot of sacrifices on a social and personal level. And becoming a certain level, because to be a chef, you need to be creative. And to be creative, you need to be involved, right? So there's always been a lot of sacrifice. Maybe a bit less towards the end if you want, but still a lot of sacrifice. Yes, it's true.
Do you remember your first day as a chef? Your feelings?
So I have to clarify, because for chefs, you're only a chef when you're the boss of the kitchen. Okay. Do you mean the first day as a cook, or do you mean the first day as a chef?
The first day as a chef.
As a chef, so I have to remember. When was my first position as a chef? Now I remember, it was in Boston. And what was your question?
What was your feeling? Do you remember? So
very nervous. Every time I became a chef, not only the first time, but every time you get a new job in the highest position in the kitchen, if you want, it's a new team, a new boss, a new environment, very nervous, because you have to think about, actually food becomes the last of your concerns. You have to worry about everything else but the food. To worry about the staff, you have to worry about the organization, you have to worry about relationship, human resource, you know what I mean? So much stuff to worry about for you to be able to focus on the food, because a chef should focus on food, but the food is maybe only 50% of the job,
What was the most challenging situation in your career?
All of them.
Few examples.
The most challenging, say that again, the most challenging situation?
Situation, yes.
I guess there would be two. One is when I worked for Thomas Keller in California. the two guys that were below me, they called sous chefs, they were not hired by me. So they were actually hired by Thomas Keller. So they were very jealous of me, and they did not make my job very easy. I'll just say that. That was very challenging for me because I don't like confrontation. I'm not a person I'm not confrontational.
Do you still in touch with them?
No,
Okay.
not at all. And then when I opened Mozaic, also I would say was very challenging because I didn't realize the challenges of running a business in Bali.
And speaking about Mozaic, what motivated you to go to Bali? Was it an opportunity or a life choice?
So the first time I came to Bali was for a job. I was in New York City. I wanted to go to Asia to learn about Asian cooking. I applied to I sent 100 times my resume, and a Singaporean company hired me to come to Bali to open a hotel. So that's a professional opportunity, if you want. But then I left, went back to New York, but my girlfriend was Indonesian. And the only way for her to come to New York with me because she's Muslim was to marry her. As an American, there's no choice, or in America. So we married, lived in the US for 2 years, but then I wanted to come back to Bali. And therefore it became a life choice to open Mozaic.
And today, live in Bali, how long do you live here?
More than 23 years.
Wow.
I not count anymore, but more than 23 years. Yeah.
So it's not only about cooking. So what is your normal? How do you start your day in Wood? What do you do in your free time? What's your normal day without your job?
Okay. Obviously, things are quite different lately because of Corona. So I can't say
Yes.
things are normal if you want. But I spend a lot of time with my family.
Do you have kids?
We have 3 children.
They also cooking with you?
One of them actually, yes, cooks with me, works here as part of school. He's still in hospitality management, but one of them seems to be going into the line, I'm not sure yet, chef or just hospitality. So I spend a lot of time with my children, and so, you know, it starts from cooking breakfast to taking them out to the beach to you know, doing their homework so spending a lot of time with the family. And because it's Corona, it's the right time to do that, you know.
Sure.
Otherwise I would go traveling around the world, but right now I can't do that.
And if we speak about cultural differences, for example, what are the main differences between French and Indonesian cultures? And how do you cope with Balinese culture in terms of restaurant management on a daily basis?
That's a very tough question. I would say that there are no similarities between Indonesian culture and French culture, but I would probably be wrong. It's a generalization. But being married to an Indonesian, having a business in Indonesia, 3 children in Indonesia, I have discovered so much about Indonesian culture that the more you know about the culture, the less you realize that it's close to French or American culture. It's a completely different culture. That's why I answered very little in the comment. But I'm sure, you know, there is some commonality around maybe religion, around food, around holidays, or, you know, things like that. But I'm generalizing. Challenges in
management, in the restaurant management with your team.
Again, very challenging, very different. Sorry, very different. Not challenging because different. Therefore, you need to re-educate yourself. I would say that in Indonesia, you need to be more of a father, or if you're a female, a mother figure with the employees. So it's not, you know, in the West, as a chef or as an owner, you might just be the boss. But bossing people around doesn't always work here. You need to be more like a parent, teaching, coaching, listening, career for them, I can't generalize, right? Everybody's different. But in general, the Balinese are not very career oriented. Religion and culture is more important to them than their career. Not all of them, but most of them, yeah. So if you know that one of your staff has just become a steward, right, who cleans the kitchen, for him, that's his career. I'm a steward, I made it. You have to talk to someone like that differently than a guy who comes and says, I want to work for you until one day I become a chef. Different motivation, right? So there's a lot of that here, and you need to understand their culture, you need to understand their language so that you can communicate to them, because it's very important for me to have staff that are engaged. I don't want a staff that's a zombie, right? I want a staff that's smiling, talkative, shares in the ideas, and you have to build that culture. It's not easy to build a culture where people communicate. The Balinese are very shy and very quiet, so you have to educate them to open up and share.
Very interesting. And do you use the term competition while we speak about restaurant sector? In your opinion, what make the key factor makes restaurant successful or non-successful, unsuccessful?
So competition, yes, there is competition in the industry, no doubt. It's become, Mozaic is 20 years old, so the competition today compared to 20 years ago, let me tell you, it has definitely multiplied by 1,000-fold. But competition is healthy. Our business has grown over the last 20 years. So as more restaurants open, we actually bring more people to Ubud or to Bali, and therefore we're able to make more business, which is incredible. You would think maybe competition would reduce your business,
Yes.
but actually not yet. What was the second part of your question?
What is the key factor when we speak about successful and unsuccessful restaurants?
So obviously nobody knows what the key factors to a successful restaurant are. Otherwise, some people would have only successful restaurants and others would not. And we don't know. I've opened 5 restaurants in Bali, and I would say maybe only 2 or 3 have been successful. So why?
So Mozaic is not the first one.
No, Mosaic is the first one.
The first one, okay.
And the last one also. But we've had Mosaic, we've had Mosaic Beach Club, we've had a Spice by Chris Salans in Ubud, in Sanur, in Seminyak. So we've tried a lot of different things over the last 20 years. So if I knew what was the key to success, all my restaurants would be successful, but they're not. But obviously a big part of the success, if I can be global, is to understand the market and to understand how things work in your environment. So Bali is a tourist destination. Tourists, how do they hear about restaurants? So there is online, right? TripAdvisor, Honeycomb, whatever. There are all these online platforms that you can learn, right? There's social media that influences things. And then when you travel agents, if you use a travel agent, and then when you get to Bali, you probably stay in a hotel or in a villa and you ask, hey, where should I go? So if you know that and you work on that, your restaurant can be successful, regardless if you're selling pizza or fine dining or borscht or whatever it is that you want to sell, paella, you know what I mean? So it's not always the food, but it's also the marketing that's very important.
I see you like Russian cuisine.
I like all foods.
All foods.
Yeah. Food is my language. So wherever I travel, I travel a lot for food. And I've been to Russia, but wherever I go, I love the food. I mean, there's bad food, there's good food, but.
By the way, we have remarked that you like to participate in shows, in collaborations in other restaurants. Are you ready to share your experience and secrets with them? And maybe you can share one professional secret with us.
Secret, oh my God. I think with age, as you get older, you see things differently. My parents used to tell me that, I never believed them, but now that I'm there, I believe it. So I think, you know, like I've always had a passion for teaching, and I always thought one day I would open a cooking school. And I almost did it, but then Corona. But then I realized that, you know, sharing is part of the game. I mean, you want to influence others and you share. And another thing about sharing is if you share, that means if I don't want to fall asleep, I am forced to create. The more I create, the more I can share my past creations because I'm innovating. I'm already in the future. What I'm teaching you is the past. So it's okay. It forces me to move forward by sharing. So yes, I do share. A professional secret. I mean, it's not going to be a secret because it's either going to be too technical, or, you know, I mean, make sure your knives are super sharp, right? Because if your knives are not sharp, you can't cut properly. Use 2 types of salt, a table salt and a sea salt. They have different saltiness. So instead of, a lot of food is too salty because the chef uses 1 type of salt and puts too much. Use 2 types of salt and you have a more rounded saltiness. Maybe that's more of a secret, and many others. There's so many secrets in the kitchen.
How would you describe your style of cooking, and what is your maybe favorite dish? Do you have one?
Okay, so my style of cooking is freestyle. No, what I mean by that is, I mean, it's in my cookbook. I say I cook what I like with the ingredients that I have. And that's very true. If I go to Russia, I go to Japan, I go to Bali, I go to Paris, I can cook. I go to the market, I taste flavors, and I connect those flavors with past memories. I happen to be in Bali, so obviously my food is very Indonesian ingredient influence. I cook with the ingredients of Bali, but I cook French food if you want, but not traditional French food. So I use I should have said I use French techniques of cooking and presentation, but I use the ingredients from my environment. So it is modern French cooking using Indonesian ingredients.
And your favorite dish? Do you have one?
My favorite dish? There is no favorite dish because every time I find my favorite dish, I think I'm not happy with it and I try to create the next dish. And this
Always
is the disease of the chef. Yeah, the disease of the chef is you work to perfection, and when you achieve the perfection, you're unhappy and you move on.
I understand you.
Yeah.
Do you consider...
I'm sad that you understand.
Do you consider the gastronomy as a luxury sector of business? And today, what is luxury for you?
Okay. I think that unfortunately gastronomy often is a luxury product because of the ingredients that we use are expensive or imported in Bali, and therefore it becomes an expensive product. And if it's expensive, it could be luxurious. But I think there has to be people doing gastronomy that is not too expensive, and that exists. A lot of the top chefs in the world, they have a little bistro, a little cafe where they do the same concept, but don't import anything. Use only local products and don't use the most expensive, just use fresh, you know. And we kind of did that with our Spice concept, which is our other restaurant, Spice by Chris Salans. You could eat there for 200,000 instead of eat at Mozaic for 2 million. So I think there's a way of doing gastronomy without it being luxury. But 90% of the time, yes, it is. And what was your second question? The second part of the question?
What is luxury today for you? How can you describe this
Today,
difficult
because
word?
of Corona, luxury is not having Corona. Luxury is living in Bali. I think living in Bali, I see my parents in Paris, my brothers in
travel.
Washington, D.C. Luxury, travel would be luxury.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, but you cannot really travel properly nowadays, you know, especially with a family and stuff like that. So I think luxury is being in Bali because we're outdoors. We're not confined in a small space. There aren't many tourists, so there's no traffic, no pollution. We can go out and about. You can still ride your bicycle. So I consider myself lucky to be in the luxury of Bali.
Okay. Chris, the last question, a little bit
Yes.
complicated, okay?
Okay, I'll try.
We speak always about etiquette, culinary rules. What about professional jokes? Do you have your favorite one?
Okay. Actually, humor in the kitchen is always a bit, it's a bit gross. It's not very proper humor that we use in the kitchen. I'm not really sure why. Maybe because we spend 14 hours a day standing up, cutting ourselves and burning ourselves. So I don't think I can share any jokes that we tell each other in the kitchen. But there's one that only a chef will understand. But hopefully you have chefs watching this.
Sure.
But, you know, when you work in the kitchen, you're probably, I'll try to recall when I worked, for example, in Paris or New York. I would go to work at 7 a.m. and I would leave work around midnight. I would get home at 1, go to bed at maybe 2, and I'd have to wake up at probably 5:30. So that's the normal life of a chef. And the salary that we got was not enough to rent an apartment. So we had to share apartments between several chefs. So you're working long hours, you don't make any money, and then when you're at work, the chef is screaming at you all the time. And because there's so much pressure, and you're standing and you're tired and you don't sleep enough, you tend to burn and cut yourself a lot because you make mistakes, you know. And we're drinking, 14 coffees a day just to stay awake. So if you can think like that, then you can think like a chef. And we always used to ask each other, what are we doing here? Why are we here? We get screamed at, we get no pay, we get treated like shit, so why are we here? And we used to always say, we're here for the glory, which is not funny. But in the kitchen, when you're tired, everybody laughed a lot. So that's a chef's joke. Yeah. We're not here for the money. We're not here for the love that we get from the chef. We're just here for the glory. But there is no glory because nobody knows who we are. So it's gloom. It's a dark humor. French humor, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yes,
That's right.
Professional one.
Professional. Sarcastic, yeah.
So thank you, Chris, for your time.
Thank you very
for your
much. Thanks for
interview.
listening to
It
my
was a
jokes.
pleasure. Have a good day.
Same to you. Thank you.
Bye.